Sweet True Slasher Review.
Okay. It's been about a month of this tournament, and it all boils down to this night. We have the semifinals and the finals. We're going to just start with the first matchup. 1974, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre against Candyman, 1992.
So this is the winner of the upper left-hand quadrant against the winner of the lower left-hand quadrant, if you're playing at home.
Thank you, Rob. I would have been confused.
I'm
I
confused.
appreciate that.
This one sucks.
This one does suck. This one, I know how I'm voting, but I don't want to say.
I feel like the problem is they're both great movies is the first problem. The second problem is they're both very different movies, to where you have Texas Chainsaw, which is very dirty and dingy and gringy, and I mean that in a good way. And then you have Candyman, that is a much more sophisticated film, and they packed a lot of issues with their times, and even today, a lot of that's in there, with that social impact of it. And Texas Chainsaw didn't have any of that. It was just a full-blown slasher. Not that Candyman wasn't, but it's just very different things happen.
All right, counterpoint. This is super easy. Do you just want me to vote?
Yeah, go for it.
Are you being spiteful here? Because
No.
2
No.
years
I don't think
of
he
TCM?
is.
This is super easy. This is Candyman.
Maybe he is.
It's a better movie.
Okay, hang on.
I'm gonna let everybody know now. I'm leaning Candy.
It's Candyman. How is it not?
Because it's the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
TCM shouldn't even be here. Let's just be honest.
Okay, it absolutely should be here. I love Candyman.
Do you need me to consult the official list?
So much. I don't need you to. Do you want me to consult my official list?
Your list is not official.
Media lists are official. I got no
It's a fun little thing that we let you do, but I have the official one. And Candyman is number 6, and TCM is number 16.
It's insane that it's number 16. That is so low.
This is how it is.
No. Listen, I love Candyman. I love it a bunch, and it does have social things. It tells a good story. I think it was really ahead of its time in a lot of ways. It wasn't the fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre, though. Like, as a film, it's so hard to beat the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I don't think Candyman is the one that does it.
I'm not locked into Candyman, but I'm leaning it. I think the story is the biggest. Again, these are both great, and you have to look at a lot of different things, a lot of different ways to really figure out. Like, it's a hard decision. The story of Candyman is, like, I like Texas Chainsaw and all, but it's, rednecks in the woods or fields, whatever, same concept. Candyman was something very, it was Bloody Mary-ish, but even still, it was so different. What are you thinking here?
Well,
are you locked into one?
I am locked into one, but I stand by it. I don't think TCM should even be here right now. I think it should have been Halloween versus Candyman, and I probably would have chose Halloween. But like I don't want to say positive takeaways, but like my only positive takeaways from TCM are like the dinner table scene, the ending, and like maybe the head bonking scene from the like in the middle of the movie. Like, that's it. But like the rest of like Candyman is like such a compelling character. The music is great. The story is great. Like the aesthetic of that movie is just so much better in my opinion. So I'm gonna choose Candyman in this one.
Chris, what are you thinking, man?
I'm gonna kind of lean more to the film that I think was better shot and at least had more impact to me, and I'm gonna say it was Texas Chainsaw.
Okay, so right now we're split Kat and Chris going for Texas Chainsaw, and Rob and Will going Candyman. Greg, what are you thinking?
Oh, this one was easy. I mean, for starters, it should be Halloween, not Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But for me, it's easily Candyman because Candyman is the best in its franchise. TCM isn't. That's one. Two, there is no dinner scene in Candyman. And three, Candyman doesn't have Franklin. Candyman wins.
Yeah, but Franklin doesn't die in Candyman. Texas Chainsaw Massacre wins.
But he's in it to begin with.
Yeah.
Like whether even though he dies, which he should, because he's an awful character, he shouldn't be in it. So even if I take out that, I still have more positives for Candyman. Plus, Tony Todd or Gunnar Hansen. Who do you want to fuck? I'd rather fuck Candyman. I'd rather fuck Tony Todd. Your dad might let Tony Todd fuck me. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Let's be honest. If Tony Todd wants to fuck you, he's gonna fuck you one way or another.
Mm-hmm.
Amber, are you locked into anything?
Yes, I'm locked into Candyman. And even though I love both of these movies and I've always been, hardcore for TCM, I had to go a different way of looking at them. And I would rather have sex with Tony Todd than Gunnar Hansen. I'm sorry.
You happy now, Rob? This is what you've brought the show to.
This is what the show is. It's a beauty pageant now that can only be won by Tony Todd. Are you pleased with yourself?
You can't blame me for turning the world into wanting to fuck Tony Todd. That's just how it is.
That's just a given. We can't have brackets based off of that. It's true.
Well,
everybody wants that.
We could have a bracket based off of that. I think we're smelling what next year's Murder Madness is cooking.
Dr. Dan Chalice is going to be a tough out.
Son of a bitch.
He goes against Tony Todd.
I'm sorry. I would take Dr. Chalice over Tony Todd.
He fucked his way to the third round of a tournament that wasn't even about fucking.
That's
Talking
right.
about
This tournament isn't supposed to be about fucking.
All right. What Greg said is a part of what Greg said is they're very different movies doing very different things. You get the cannibalism and all that in Texas Chainsaw, but you get like Candyman is a love story. And I equate this to the original Hellraiser as well. And it's very rare that you get that type of depth in a story without it crossing that line of not horror or cheesy or too romantic or whatever. It truly had that dark sense of that love story in Candyman. And man, Candyman himself, I mean, the character has depth. Leatherface doesn't. As cool as he is and as awesome as he is, he doesn't. If we're really getting down to what's better, I kind of have to go Candyman here as well.
Absolute travesty. The thing is that it is. As a story, I completely understand where you're coming from, except for that, the groundbreaking cinematography, the atmosphere, the actual filmmaking that went into the Texas Chainsaw Massacre makes it a great film. Like, as a horror movie, it does better, and also it's scarier.
I don't know about that.
It 100% is. And you know why? Because this is something that I get into with Hellraiser, where the fear of temptation is a real fear. And I think that's what they were going for on some levels of Candyman. But you know what isn't a real fear? Wanting to fuck Tony Todd. What was the danger Helen was in? Fucking Tony Todd. Like, I'm not afraid of that. Fucking a Cenobite? That scares me a little bit.
I want to fuck Tony Todd too, but I don't want to die to do it, to be fair.
I think what you're short selling here, Kat, is the setting of Candyman. We don't get nearly enough urban horror.
But
even
I don't
today,
think that
we
makes
don't get
it
enough of that inner
better
city
than Texas Chainsaw
project
Massacre.
urban horror. And Candyman is a landmark film. Candyman is just as much a landmark film in that respect as Texas Chainsaw Massacre is, because we get about 4 movies of hillbillies attacking people in the middle of nowhere every month.
Yeah, but why do we get that?
And the lore that surrounds Candyman that they built for that character is incredible. Candyman, and I've said this before, is the single most sympathetic villain in any horror franchise.
Okay, I haven't ranked sympathetic villains of horror franchises. I agree he's among them, if not the most. But again, I don't necessarily think that makes it better as a film. As a film, I think Texas Chainsaw Massacre is better.
Well, no, as a film, it's just better.
It's not.
I mean, the characters are better, the story's better.
And the whole landmark thing, just because we haven't pursued it as much, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre really started that whole thing because so many movies want to be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the exorcism thing all over again.
Yeah,
that's true.
But and Mikey pointed out when we had the conversation about the My Bloody Valentine remake and the what's original and what is a remake, a lot of the lore that you're talking about came from the short story that Candyman was adapted from. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was an original film. That was a film.
I get that Candyman was adapted from a short story, but the setting was also changed, and there was a lot of stuff changed.
Much like Texas Chainsaw being based off of what's his name, Gwen. I mean, it was exaggerated greatly, but it wasn't entirely original. The Hillbillies in the Woods have been
more than Candyman.
Not so much. It was based off of something somebody did.
It was based off
in the news.
It was based off Ed Gein, who was in Wisconsin, mostly dug up dead women, and really only had a body count of 2 people.
Right, but hillbillies attacking you in the middle of nowhere has been a fear forever. Texas Chainsaw didn't really create that. And a movie that did not want to be Texas Chainsaw, Candyman. They did not replicate anything they did off of Texas Chainsaw, which was a groundbreaking film. But like Rob said, so was Candyman. It didn't do anything we've seen in any other horror movies. It did its own movie without a lot of those tropes, if any of them, really.
Yeah,
and they did a phenomenal job.
You know what else didn't base off of those tropes? The fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
But it based off of a real killer. Or not killer, but, he did kill people or whatever he did. I mean, it was based off of real events that happened.
Yeah, but really the thing
the final girl
is it brought like a wider element to the audience that they've never really seen before. And even though it's completely fictionalized, it's kind of like Chris said, it's based off of Ed Gein, where Candyman, that actually did happen up in Chicago, in the Chicago area. And it's based off of like a folklore, but still true events actually did happen. There was a murderous person that they would call the Candyman. He did what he did. And I'm not trying to take away from TCM because I absolutely love it, but it just, Candyman brings a little bit more.
And I was going to bring up what Rob said as well. The Chicago, man. Texas Chainsaw did nail its environment better than probably any other movie has in an environment like that. But so did, when you see Leprechaun in the Hood, we joke about it all the time. When you see an urban set movie, that's usually what you get. This did not mock that. It made it dude, like I'm not from Chicago, but I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in places that look like that. And they fucking nailed it. And that's how the people in those areas act to people. Helen coming in and shit, like, it was very real. And the tones from that alone it was something to be said for them. And I think it added a whole nother layer of fear to what she was doing on top of the whole Candyman thing, which is, what the movie's about. But it was so beautifully done the way they were able to intertwine what Helen's going through. And then she's got her shit at home that, her husband is got moved on now. And, someone living in her house and everyone thinks she's fucking crazy. And why wouldn't they? It was massive. Like the depth in what they did there, as much as I love TCM, there just wasn't that level of depth. It didn't exist. I love TCM a lot, but Candyman.
I don't think you do. It's the foundation of slasher movies in so many ways. So many of our tropes, so many of our brackets, so many of the things that we fight about started with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah, you're being irrational.
And I'm not being irrational. I'm the only one being rational here. I love Candyman so much, but it is not the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And it's, you can look at all of the things that it did that were new and inventive, but like it goes back to the bedrock that was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Like the whole genre was impacted by this movie, and it still is, it has held up so well.
Yeah, but it doing it first doesn't gain it any points on what was better in a movie.
First and best.
No, I mean, she's right. It does hold up well. It is the 16th best horror movie of all time.
God damn it, Rob.
But Tony Todd holds up, Candyman holds up pretty good too.
Yeah, that's the 6th best.
Fourth best movie of all time.
Tony Todd has been in so many movies. Final Destination, all these big franchises too. A lot of his filmography is crazy. People just talk to him about Candy. Still to this day. It was an important point in horror. Like my mother and my aunt were scared of this movie. I remember it. Like the Bloody Mary thing still creeps people out. And it fed on that. I mean, I don't think it can be argued that the depth in Candyman is insanely higher than Texas Chainsaw. Like Texas Chainsaw did a lot of the things well along the way, but it was just a prototypical slasher.
It was literally the prototypical slasher. It was the prototype for slasher.
Psycho,
I don't
Christmas,
understand why we're having. You are baffling me with this.
It is true. Black Christmas, Psycho, Peeping Tom, you could even throw in there, not to be cliche.
And we can talk about the social commentary. And listen, I'm not going to say that it's not the best movie in its franchise, because as a film, I do think it is the best film in its franchise. But if we're talking about like the setting and the social commentary, it doesn't even do that the best in its franchise, because Nia DaCosta fucking knocked it out of the water on both of those fronts.
I don't know if I would say she did social commentary better than the original.
I 100% would.
I think that she made a film that has social commentary that's more relevant to today.
Right.
But I don't think that she nailed it better than Candyman did for its time.
I think there was a lot more meat on the bone for her to play with in the social aspect, because, you know, social media and just, you know, all the shit that's happened since then. The isolation they captured for Chicago and that community and that project, you felt it. There was nowhere for them to go. They showed you what they deal with on an everyday level. Nia DaCosta didn't really do that to that degree. Like they spoke of it, but they didn't really show you what, you know, these people are going through. And it was completely, it wasn't in, you know, these people, these were people making money. They lived in nice apartments and beautiful, nicer than my house. There wasn't that sense of being deprived, and, you know, like it just wasn't the same as, and again, maybe it's because I grew up in places like that. So I know how it, you know, how it felt to that. Maybe not so much to that degree. That Chicago's real bad. They showed us that. Nia DaCosta didn't.
You know where else they didn't have anywhere to run? Fucking Texas.
Well, but see, and that's the difference. That's a house in the middle of nowhere. You're talking Chicago. There's tens of thousands of people there, and you still have nowhere to go. There's something to be said for that, I think.
At the fact that we're talking about real projects here. We're talking about projects where every apartment is damn near identical. And they showed that. You know, like he pointed out, you're talking about a house in the middle of nowhere. You're talking about kids exploring in an area that they really shouldn't have been. But when you look at Candyman, these are real projects. Those are real homes that those people had to deal with all this shit with. And again, I'm not taking a crap on TCM, because TCM paved the way for a lot of good slashers. It really and truly did. But overall, if you look at it more investively, it's gonna be Candyman.
I just think Candyman did more. And that's really, and the line is so thin for me.
Candyman did more, but Texas Chainsaw Massacre mastered every single thing that it did to a degree that has not been replicated, and it's insane to me.
I haven't seen Candyman
this is gone.
replicated either, though. Honestly, like I said, mostly when you get any type of setting like that in a horror movie, it's Leprechaun in the Hood. You know, it's things like that is what you get. Tales from the Hood and all those things. Like, it's mocking it more than anything and playing with it, which is fun, but it's not, there's no realism there. It's not there. Movies like that are not scary. They're just fun to watch. I mean, it wasn't easy for me. And honestly, listening not that my vote mattered anyway, but it if you put Candyman and Leatherface next to each other, what they were able to do with Candyman was great. And Tony Todd's performance, we want to talk about performances. No one in either movie can even come remotely close to Tony Todd, not even Gunnar Hansen. And Helen too. Helen nailed it too. Candyman moves on. That is a tough fucking decision. And speaking of another one, that is...
I'm going to pull a Rob. I'm going to quit the show.
The next matchup, and this determines who goes up against Candyman in the finals. It's A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1984, up against Saw.
The winner of the upper right-hand quadrant against the winner of the lower right-hand quadrant.
You're not allowed to say quadrant on this show once this episode's over. You know that.
You just did.
We'll see.
After the episode. Can't say it no more. I mean, I think it's Nightmare. Anybody not leaning Nightmare? What are we thinking here?
No, it's Nightmare.
Not even I could devil's advocate this one. It's Nightmare by a large margin.
Will, what are you thinking, man?
I mean, I'll swing the praises first. Saw had the better ending. It had better. I don't say. It had a better twist, in my opinion.
Oh yeah,
more likable characters. Probably not. I mean, both concepts are like equal, in my opinion. I think Nightmare has like a better concept because I think it's scarier than Saw. Like, I'd be terrified if I got stuck in a Saw trap, but like just the thought of somebody in my head and they can hurt me while I'm asleep and I can't get away from them. I'm eventually going to have to fall asleep and I'm going to have to confront this person. It's much more scary. I mean, I'm getting like my heart is racing just thinking about it right now. And I think Nightmare also has better music, has a better story, better characters. I just have to give it to Nightmare.
I will say this though, because I'm part of the reason that Saw got here.
Yeah, you sure are. Some might say you're the sole reason that Saw got here. You jackass.
Kinda. It's just another case of very different movies and coming out at very different times. But we did just see a later movie going, because, you know, a lot of people say, oh, you're always going to pick the original or the more classic film. And, you know, we just seen that.
I'm not going to say that after today.
That's what I'm saying. It didn't happen in the last matchup, but it's really such different things because Saw wasn't really, I mean, you could argue Jigsaw, John Kramer, sure, maybe even Billy the Puppet at first in the movie, because you don't get too much on Kramer right away, but it was more of a balls to the wall movie as opposed to a slower pace killer movie. Like Saw, the killer is John Kramer, but physically he's not doing it, and it's so different. Saw did a lot of things better than Nightmare, but I think when you really boil it down to a horror movie, what they were able to create in Freddy Krueger, even because this is when he was his most scary. So like, forget about what Freddy Krueger became. He was scary here, and you feared him, and you didn't know what he was. And I mean, it's going to be hard to get Nightmare out of here. I think, Greg, you're a Nightmare guy.
I have the official list. If anybody needs the rankings, I can let you know what they are.
Throw your list away, Greg. Are we going to be shocked here by your vote?
Well, I mean, for starters, neither of these films should be here, but it's Nightmare. It hands down, it's Nightmare. Like when I watched Saw in theaters, I knew as soon as I heard one line of dialogue that Kramer was the dude in the middle, lying on the ground. When it was he likes to be close to his victims, I'm like, that's the guy in the middle, right? Yeah, it's Nightmare's just it's a better movie. It really is. I also don't think Saw is that good of a film to begin with. Not counting the later ones where it just became like, torture porn. But the first Saw film, like, was okay. The first Nightmare film is great. Like, it's for me, this is a no-brainer, and it's Nightmare.
Amber?
I have to give credit to both of them because I thought that the first Saw was actually really good. I did. I enjoyed it. But honestly, nothing can compare to the first time that you see Freddy stretch out his arms and you hear that metal striking metal. It just chills you, even to this day. Definitely Nightmare on Elm Street.
Cat.
I'm really debating going Saw just so I can have a Rob sweep this episode.
It's a bad matchup for Saw.
Here's the thing is I ranked A Nightmare on Elm Street higher when we did like our top movie list when it was like a combination. And then we were talking about Saw last week. I honestly, Saw is so good. It's so good. If I were going to throw a pity vote this final round, it would be to Saw. But I'm not going to. I can get to a place where I would feel confident being the person to have that take. But Nightmare, it is a classic. It's I don't know. We're talking about two movies that have like a twist on the slasher thing,
Yeah.
Saw has a better soundtrack. I honestly kind of like the story of Saw better also, but Freddy's just such an icon.
That's the thing too. It's like it's going up against Freddy that is a dream demon. How the fuck do you beat that story? It's so dope in so many ways. It's like, and that's something Saw had going for it, was that story, and that's why I went with it over Let the Right One In the last round. I just wanted to point that out to Rob again. But even this is like, fuck, a dream demon.
I was kind of thinking because like there's part of my brain that's like, because Candyman got so hyped up the last round for having more story and substance, part of me really, really wants to vote Saw, but it would be a spite vote, and I'm not about that. I'm not going to be petty. Nightmare can have its sweep.
It's just a bad matchup. Goddamn.
Pettiness doesn't suit you, Cat.
I just said I wasn't going to be petty.
I'm saying.
All right.
It works for some people. Not you. Works for me.
I was just going to say, are you talking about yourself there, Mr. Rob Humphrey?
No, he's Mr. Where Are My Balls?
And where are my balls?
All right. I'm going to be honest here. Last year's Nightmare on Elm Street won last year, didn't it?
Yeah.
Nightmare on Elm Street wins, I feel like, every year.
I told you coming into this like last week, you were like, oh, this is going to be tough. I'm like, I already know what's going to win.
Well,
I know what
I
should
still
win,
don't know
and I know what's going to win.
Honestly. Last year was kind of a womp.
I don't think you know what should win.
I do know what should win.
Because you voted against it.
No.
Yes. 100%.
Last year's Murder Madness, I'm not going to lie, the finals was kind of a womp with Nightmare going up against the Dawn of the Dead remake. We did originals versus remakes.
I have no idea how that happened.
The year before that, was also a womp because it was, oh man, I don't even remember. I should have looked at that before we started. I don't even know if I have the sheet anymore. It was Rhea Ripley. I just said Rhea Ripley. I watched WrestleMania tonight a little bit, but I don't even remember who Ellen Ripley went up against, to be honest, because who's going to take down Ellen Ripley? We didn't think that one through the most. It was a protagonist bracket, and it just made sense considering we just did antagonists. Pinhead won the year before, and it was actually up against Candyman in those finals, and that was tough. So the last 2 years were very easy in the finals. This is super fucking hard.
So we've made it to the finals.
Mm-hmm.
So this is it, guys. This is for the Vernal Lord Humphrey Cup.
And where are my balls?
Everybody needs to take this seriously.
Stop saying it. It's not the Lord Humphrey Cup.
It is the Lord Humphrey. I've got a picture of the Lord Humphrey Cup.
Thanks, Chris.
You're welcome, buddy.
Ass and titties.
That's-
Ass.
I swear to God.
And on this auspicious occasion, here's my brother with a song.
I was going for this one.
That was the deal.
And it's always that one that I hit when I hit the wrong button somehow.
All the best of Slasher Radio Podcast.